Welcome. Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Gnostic Studies. And today we'd like to continue the Runology series. Today is going to be a Gnostic and Rosicrucian, or historical and Rosicrucian supplement. But before we get into that material, we're going to do a review of the previous class, so that we can know what we're talking about here. In the previous class, we talked about the Eisen historically, and we looked at first Fischbach. What he says about it doesn't say a lot. He says that it's zigzag in ancient Greek, therefore related to the lightning, and that it's the sunbeam as well as a sword. And then he says is equals iron, which is used to make swords. And then he says that if the name were not determining, then we would have to use the number 1 and the self-concept as the basis. Let's see here. Then we looked at Guido von List. He says is means ice as well as iron. Gave a little poem and says, through the undoubting consciousness of their own spiritual might, the waves are tamed and subdued or frozen like ice. But not only the waves emblematic for willpower, but all life is obedient to the strongly compelling will. Seems to be making an association between strong willpower and this rune. The vigorously willed spirit, the hypnotic power of the vigorously willed spirit. Therefore gain or win power over thyself, and thou wilt have power over everything in the spiritual and physical worlds that resist thee. Gain power over yourself, and you will have power over the world. In 1924, Kurtzon, he says it exoterically, it means control or mastery. Esoterically, magical force, as well as the masculine or male principles and the universe. And in general, it means ice, iron, magic or charm, and positivity. The East rune is formed by a single upright line through the movement of the divine central point up and down. So this is an older example of creation where we have a circle and then a circle with a point in the middle, which is also the symbol of the sun. And then as this point moves up and down, it creates a line. He says this pole rune also means the phallus, and therefore this rune is a male rune as opposed to the Ka rune, which is a female rune. The Ethiphalos, the erect phallus, is also a magic wand by which new growth and blossoming is created from the lower material realm. The wand of the magicians was assumed, probably in reference to this symbolic meaning of an ode radiating and life-giving phallus, from which the ode of the operator flows during magical operations, just as it does from the phallus of the procreating man. For this reason, this rune also means magic and magical operations, which are only possible through the forces emanating from the central point of the universe, God. But these enormous forces will be fruitful only in the hand of a person who made the difficult art, who has made the difficult art of self-control or self-mastery completely their own, and having done so from the ground up. Only in this way will they be able and be called to rule or control, master others. Right? So he's now associating this willpower thing with self-control. There is much talk of white and black magic. These differentiations are often chosen quite thoughtlessly, because there is neither a white good or black evil magic. Good and evil is also the intended use or is only the intended use or intended purpose. After all, you can heal or kill with poison without it having to be good one time and evil the other. That's his opinion, right? The East rune furthermore forms the trunk cross. So he's the trunk of the cross, and this is the beam. He associates it with the word Inri. We're going to hop over that. But he does say that they were used as charms to calm a sea that was choppy. So they put it on boats. The East rune, according to R.J. Gorsleben, 1930. East rune is ice, icicle, iron, as well as the self, or the inner being. Everything rigid and solidifying. Death, the calm in the center of the constantly moving world of phenomenon. Also the wave, the will, that which eternally turns or rotates, the axis. The rune of the inner being, the self, as well as of the personality, of self-control or self-mastery, determination, masculinity, and of magical force. The center point moving up and down, which we mentioned before. It is movement, it is action or doing. Tat. The rune shows one vertical line, a single vertical line, the ace, the divine self. And the self, conscious of its own spiritual might, causes the undulating waves, symbolic of the will, to smooth out, to solidify, to freeze into ice, as the introductory stanza says. The East rune shows the upright human being, the builder's stone, the Irmin, the pillar of the law, obelisk, the column, the sole axis of the universe, which connects humanity with heaven. It shows the upright human being. It corresponds to the military at-attention command. Thus, a miracle then happens. People, soldiers at arms, become a field of East runes. Person by person, under one command, they become a stone circle or a group of standing stones, emerging like Stonehenge. Each person is an ordered, trained, and disciplined world within themselves, and altogether they're also another world. Thus signifying, gain power over yourself, and you will have power over others. Right, that was mentioned before. The East rune is the magic wand carried by the magician, a symbol of the life-giving, odd-radiating phallus. The pole rune, the phallus rune, where the symbol of the scepter emerged. The universal axis with the eagle, the R, the sun, at its zenith. The powerful forces that lie within this rune can only become fertile alive in the hands of the one who has conquered themselves. Right? We already mentioned self-mastery. Let us understand that the human being is the living East rune, whether they're aware of it or not. We stand vertically perpendicular to the center of the earth, under the influence of the effective forces, streams, and waves that are moving through the universe. As human beings, we are an antenna of nature, who allows the effects of these cosmic forces to flow within, both the beneficial as well as the unbeneficial ones, and we do so to the extent that we are willing and able to absorb them. The East rune is the axis of the world, which goes through the center of the earth. It also goes through any human being standing upright on any place of the earth. The cosmic rays slide down our spine on their way from the heights to the depths. Thus, the initiate draws down the forces of the cosmos upon themselves, and this makes them spiritually and physically resistant to all the corruption that surrounds them. The sound of the rune is E. The spoken sound resonates and vibrates throughout the whole body. It sounds from the head, from the top of the skull down the spine, through the legs to the middle of the feet. Lift or raise the E sound in the same way as when asking a question. E. And the wave flows upwards, rising from the heels up through the whole body. Only a terrible neglect of all genuine reconnection with the divine caused this knowledge to perish. That's a statement. The human being can only be their own mediator with God. I am the center point and the axis of the universe, says the East rune. Where could God be if he did not live and speak within me, and I in him? This rune connects us eternally with the God of the universe. It is the axis of the soul. The Ich, the self, is the will, which understands the universe as will and imagination. The East rune represents this will in the spatial sense as a wave, a will as wave. However, the wave is only the external manifestation of the will, which gives the impulse behind it. Will and wave are correspondences, and the East rune is the wave of the will which is active within the self. It's a very nice definition. When Schopenhauer describes the world as will and imagination, we add, the human being is wave and rotation, or wave and turning. It is the will that puts this wave in motion. The cosmic wave is an expression of the cosmic will. This universal and self-will in which we want what we should want. Let me read it to you again. This universal and self-will in which we want what we should will also make us insurmountable in spiritual matters through rigorous training. This is the cosmic task, to be fulfilled through the right attitude of the self, of every individual, of each East rune, in order to fulfill the will, the wavelength of the Irminsul, the universal column, the universal soul. The cosmic task to be fulfilled through the right attitude of self of each individual. Then he talks about the negative or horizontal line, which he calls the Tellus Earth rune, the female Se rune, and that it implies you or they or she, whereas the East runes implies self. So it's kind of like saying us and them, or self and other. He says the name Isis contains in its rune symbol the cross, the male self rune, the East rune, and the superimposition or tipped over form of the female Sie rune. If put on top of each other, we have a plus cross, the symbol of Christ, of Jesus. If we speak both runes, one after the other, we get the name of God of the Egyptians, Is-Se, Sie. In its contraction, Is-Is. Isis is the oldest form of the name. It is the East of the universe, the holy name of God. And then Kummer, in 1932-33, he builds off of all this stuff, right? He says, I rune, Is, self, Ich, yes, indeed, the rune of the conscious self, or the conscious inner being. of self-control, of self-mastery, and of wise magic. Numeric value 9. Which is interesting. In Gnosis, number 9 refers to the hermit, the work on oneself, the individual work, which we could say is related to self-mastery, self-control. The Is-Ich rune is a positive masculine male rune. It is the rune of upright, vigorous, conscious guides and magicians. It leads to divine magic as well as to conscious, blessed, pure procreation. The Is-Ich rune is the wave rune, the willpower or volitional rune. Whosoever makes this rune their own inwardly receives the force to fully control or master themselves and others. The Ich rune possesses immeasurable magical forces. It was consciously used in ancient times by initiates in high mystery exercises. Also, it is the ancient mariner's rune, said to have the force to calm a stormy sea, which is why the ancient Vikings cut it into their ships. It corresponds to the one, to unity, to the great union. It is the whole cosmos, the great universe, which is connected in unity. It is eternal, divine love that permeates everything, works in all beings, and always strives to bring everything back to the great unity, the central point of all being. However, it is the 9th rune in the alphabet and indicates the magical 9 of completion. It's the symbol of the universal axis and the phallus in the humans. It further represents the yearly or annual axis as well as the north-south of the tree of life and the winter solstice. The demonic form is the Tel rune, the negative self, the lying self that is lying down, horizontal, laying, we could say. It's the sleeping human being. In the Is rune posture, the practitioner is tuned into certain universal waves, like an antenna of nature, through which one incorporates the waves of subtle force into oneself according to the practitioner's fundamental vibration, either good, healing, and invigorating, or corrupt, weakening, and even demonic. Depends on the practitioner's fundamental vibration, he says. When you sing the Is, the E sound in this position, it resonates through the whole body, sounding from the head, from the top of the skull, down the spine, through the legs, and down the middle of the feet. If the E tone is raised in the same way as when posing a question, E, then the wave flows upward through the body in reverse, beginning under the heels. If the practitioner sings the E in different pitches, it is also perceived as a different sensation in the body. And then we went through these exercises. First, he says we need to tell the body that we are in charge. We need to talk to the body. I am your supervisor. You have to obey me fully and completely. All muscle twitches are eliminated starting today. You have to submit to me. Now I want you to stand at attention before your superior, your Ich, or inner being. Now the student tries to spiritually picture themselves as a member of divine humanity, immersing themselves in this picture and forgetting the body. Practice should take about 20 minutes. Next, he's got some recommendations to do deep breathing exercises, to have regular bowel movements. Is rune also, and then he gives some breathing exercises. And then we say to ourselves, this is another exercise, myself is awakening, or I am awakening, my inner being is awakening. I am a child of humanity. I serve it through higher development and thereby acquire magical abilities. I consciously walk the path towards you, All-Father. Therefore, I always have your protection and your blessing. I love my brothers and sisters and am kind to all people. I will defeat all weakness in me, thus creating a better, healthier life for myself. I want to become wise and noble. With all my force, I openly fight all the corruption, vulgarity, inferiority, and evil which hinders my spiritual development. I live in harmony and send out only noble good thoughts. Thus, through thee, All-Father, I will arrive at the luminous goal. Then he's got a hand rune grip. Make the E sound with that. That was the end of the historical. Let me just check and see if there's any questions or comments before we jump into this next one. The Is rune according to Huiracocha. The E or Is rune is of extreme importance because it is the rune of the self, that is, of the being. The human being is a living rune perched vertically upon the earth like a king or queen and a lord. In the hands of the monarch is the scepter, a symbol of command, and the word scepter comes from skeptar, which signifies creator, producer, etc. in the primitive language. The human being is the connection between the earth and the cosmos, between the terrestrial forces and God. Schopenhauer places the will at the center of all, and thus this rune also represents willpower. But willpower as a movement, that is to say, of moving without being moved. And in this lies the great secret. Arthur Schopenhauer said the will is the innermost essence, the kernel of everything particular, of every particular thing, and also of the whole. It appears in every blindly acting force of nature, and also in the deliberate conduct of the human being. Our mission, Huiracocha says, is to prepare the disciples for white magic, to make human beings of action, of their will, so that they may triumph in all the circumstances of life. If the only true human being is the one who is a magician, then this means to say that others are not complete, that they lack something. What they lack is willpower, knowing how to will. In this is the key, and all the symbols thus teach it. Real human beings, God men, God women of the Is rune are required. The Is rune is also the lance or spear that opens the way to obtain triumph. We could say to pierce into a new domain, a new phase, or a new octave. This rune is the human magician, the magical being, the willpower being, the telema being, the able or capable being. Nonetheless, this same God rune is not completely exempt from the negative part. One can think of a personal God or an angel, since the deity is represented therein in all the divine concept of its purity. And then, by joining oneself with the divine will, we have the formation of the Superman or Superwoman, that is, of the true magician. Already the disciple has a wealth of ideas inherent in this rune, and we finish by giving the practice. The sign of attention, as we know, is also a person standing on a point. And in this same way, the military stand at attention. This is how one does the Is rune. We have learned the vowels correspond to certain parts of the body. And this rune has its resonance from the feet to the head. Is, the personality, converts itself into individuality by lifting the arms up vertically in order to form a straight line with the. Only with this, the doors of the astral open more and more. The point is to do this rune and to consciously personify it. This is how the human being becomes a true magician. He also mentions the East rune or a mantra, and says it's connected with a mantra called Harpocrates. And then finally, in our review, the Rune according to Samael and Weor. One could say that in one aspect, the Rune is the phallus, within which all the power of the sexual forces is enclosed. And yet this rune is also related with the divine feminine, which has been symbolized as Isis in Egypt. He talks about the divine mother. In occultism, much has been said about the Prakriti, space as a maternal feminine entity. The mathematical point within which the Sun King, the golden child of sexual alchemy, is always gestated. There is no doubt whatsoever that the very root of our own sacred monad, our being, resides within that mysterious point, our particular divine mother. All the sacred powers of the monad, Atman Buddhi Manas, are found contained within our divine mother Kundalini. For those who are not well versed in theosophy will say that all of the sacred powers of our own spirit are found within our own particular divine mother. And everyone has their own divine mother within. When we profoundly analyze the Rune, with mystical astonishment we discover our own being, the innermost, the intimate, or intimus. However, the root of our being is the divine mother, the Isis of the Egyptian mysteries, whose child, Horus, symbolizes our being. And then he says that Divine Mother has 5 aspects, which is symbolized by a 5-legged cow in Hinduism. The 5 aspects are the unmanifested Kundalini, Mother Nature, Queen of the Infernos, Mother Death, the particular individual, Mother Nature, that created our physical body, the origin or source of our physical body, and the instinctive elemental magician that originated our instincts. It is written that all of these unfolding aspects of the Prakriti are repeated within the microcosmic human being. What is fundamental are the 3 superior aspects of the Prakriti, and we must learn to work with them. The first 3. We need to learn to work with them all. The revolution of the consciousness would be radically impossible without the special help of our own particular adorable Divine Mother. She in herself is our own being, the root, cause, and origin of our divine spirit. She is Isis, whose veil no mortal has lifted. In the flame of the serpent we call upon her. And then he gives a story about an encounter he had with Swami Sivananda. Let's now practice the Rune, meditating on our Divine Mother. Stand in a straight position. Let us raise our arms in order to form a straight line with the whole body, and after praying and asking our Divine Mother for help, we must sing the mantra Isis as follows. Is, 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 Is. Prolong the sound of the 2 letters and divide the word into 2 syllables. Isis. Afterwards, the student must lay down with their body relaxed and concentrate and meditate on their Divine Mother. All right, that was the handout from the previous class. So you can always download it from there, from the web page. If you're interested, now we're going to jump into today's material. The Historical and Rosicrucian Supplement. Just I'm going to double check if there's any more comments. or questions. All right, so in reading this rune, reading about this rune, we studied a little bit of Huiracocha's material, and he has a tarot book. Well, he actually has a tarot deck that he references in his course on Kabbalah. And that tarot deck seems to be made by, or be a companion to, this guy A. Frank Glahn. He wrote a book called The German Tarot Book in 1920. It's the same deck. It's very interesting. I mean, obviously not very accessible if you're in English, but somehow magically the being presented this to us through doing research on the internet. We're able to get the book, scan it into the computer, and run it through a translator program, and have a little bit of information here to share with you about this. So the point is that Huiracocha knew clearly about this deck, which means he knew about Frank Glahn's book, the German Tarot Book. So, and this was written, let's say, 12 years before Huiracocha wrote about Kabbalah in his course. And some say it's the first, or one of the first, tarot books in German. So he's got a section called Magic, and he gives this explanation. And we're going to see how it's related, potentially related to what Huiracocha says about the magician. Because if you remember, he was just talking about how the human being is not a real human being unless they're a magician. And that means that they're missing something. What are they missing? That ability to be a magician, which he associates with willpower. So let's look at this now. He says, Glahn, A. Frank Glahn says, the word magic refers to the existence of the existence and the effect of forces which cannot be perceived by the five senses. Since everything happens in time and space, forces must be bound spatially and temporally. They are then in things or tied to them. So forces are in time and space, and therefore they're tied to things. Things have force. Therefore, things could be a person too, right? Or an animal, or a plant. Therefore, they are also subject to natural laws. The magician knows these forces and knows how to use them consciously. Every human being is unconsciously a magician. However, the word magician is only applied to such persons who direct forces with knowledge and consciousness. Such willpower is magic. It radiates inadvertently and subdues weakness of will. A woman's charm is a magical power, as is a man's sexual force. Those are things. All radiations are magical forces, and even the smell of a flower. Every human being has a magical force within themselves which is often unknown to them. It is called the magical self. And it can be made effective by the knower. There is magic in every sound, in every consciously transmitted word. The persuasive speaker magically captivates the listeners. A prayer transmitted with full soul force is a magical force that has been put into effect. Likewise, a curse hurled with will and consciousness is a force set into motion, which quite often flies back upon the issuer like a boomerang, and they end up striking themselves. All soul forces are components of the magical self. Now, natural forces outside of the human being differ from those inside the human being, and thus there is a need to differentiate the magician of natural forces from the magician of their own soul force. The real magician is the one who works with soul forces. They use their own person as a deposit or as a pledge. All magically applied soul forces have an effect which returns to the mover. Interesting that returns to the mover implies movement, which reminds us of the Os rune, the movement rune, the fourth one. Every human being is able to objectify the soul forces, to split or branch them off. These split beings are either demons in black magic or genii in white magic. Their existence can be demonstrated with a pendulum. Obviously, he's entitled to his opinion. I think many people would disagree that the split off things, that the objectification of soul forces is a demon or a genie. In the German tarot book, such magical forces are mentioned and their training is taught in certain highly spiritual areas. That's the end of the quote there. We know that in Huiracocha's course on tarot and Kabbalah, he references Glahn's German tarot. The concept of the magical being employed by Huiracocha in his lesson on the East rune seems to have been influenced by Glahn. The above excerpt may shed some light on the following quotes from that lesson in Huiracocha's runic course. So this is the course we just reviewed that we did in the previous class. This rune is the human being. Is the human magician, the magical being, the willpower being, the telema being, the capable being. The human being is then the magician, the one who knows how to manage their inner powers. The human being is a living rune, perched vertically on the earth like a king or queen and a lord. In this rune position, one is an accumulator and an antenna of the cosmic forces, as we have learned in the zodiacal course. The point is to do this rune and to do it consciously, to consciously personify it. This is how the human being becomes a true magician. Do not forget that this antenna can attract good and bad waves in the same position, and you have to remain with complete attention in order to always reject the bad ones and learn how to only receive the good ones for ourselves and for our fellow human beings. In vocalization, the long course, we have learned that vowels correspond to certain parts of the body, and that E, which is the tone of this rune, has to resound and has its resonance from the feet to the head. The human being in this rune is the connection between the earth and the cosmos, between the terrestrial forces and God. Schopenhauer placed the will in the center of all, and thus this rune also represents willpower, but willpower as movement, that is to say, of moving without being moved. And herein lies the great secret. If you've studied Taoism, it's kind of reminiscent of Wu Wei. Okay, so that's his concept of the magical self. And then in Treatise of Occult Medicine and Practical Magic, Samael and Weor says in the section called Occult Works with Our Neighbors, occult works with our neighbors are performed, number 1, with the genii from the stars, number 2, with the elementals of nature, and number 3, with the magical self. The magician's magical self is the intimus, the inner being. For example, if we want to join an enamored couple in wedlock, then we must beg our intimus, our inner being, so that he, in his turn, will beg Uriel, the angel of Venus. If Uriel allows this petition, then we will work with Uriel and with the elementals from nature. Yet, if the petition to this genii from Venus is not accepted, then we have no other choice but to prostrate ourselves before the verdict of the law, because the law must not be violated. No white magician violates the law. Whosoever performs magical works without permission of their intimus, their magical self, their inner being, and against the will of the divine hierarchies is a black magician who will pay their karma within the abyss. While in meditation, we can visit the heart temples of the stars, because through meditation, we can achieve being completely within the intimus. That is to say, we can completely become the magical self. We can also visit the sidereal temples in our astral bodies. So you can kind of see a theme there. This concept of the magical self is our inner being, our intimus. All right, so we saw that theme. Now we're going to jump into more of what Frank Glahn in 1920 published in his book, because he's got some very interesting ideas. We could say he's very German in his concepts, which by that we mean simply that he is precise. He likes to define things. But that can be useful for us understanding. Below, we will continue to paraphrase from Glahn's German tarot book in order to share his perspective on occultism. Let's divide the existing unintentional natural forces into physical and psychic ones. Right? 'Cause he was talking about natural forces before. He said we should differentiate between natural forces and soul forces. So now he's saying let's divide natural forces into physical and psychic ones. The Westerners have aspired for mastery of the physical ones. The Easterners, especially the highly educated peoples of South Asia, have researched the psychic ones and brought them into their power. That is under their control. However, Europe also has a guild of psychologists. But these, right, because psyche, psychologist. But these researchers of the soul, because psyche means soul, have, so far, only pronounced the word fraud with conviction when soul forces, which they do not know, are actuated. European scholars have always distinguished themselves in their condemnation of everything unknown to them. The unintentional physical forces or blind natural forces are magnetism, galvanism, electricity, and all types of radiation. Even physically provable radiations are still explained by individual scholars as fraud. Unintentional soul forces, which the magician can control, are, among others, fear or anxiety, shock, fright, hate, faith or belief, love, despair, frustration, enthusiasm, delight. We have mentioned only the states and qualities known to everyone, whose force is proverbial. But to repeat, every quality is essential and has an agent or acting force. Let me read that again. Every quality is essential and has an agent or acting force. Scientific occultism is engaged in the investigation of these qualities and their agents. But the purposeful or consciously aimed training in order to self-master them is still far away. No one will be able to understand mystical forces whose conceptions are not permeated with these super-scientific realizations and forces. And this is because, he says, no one can train in higher forces who doubts their existence, because no one can control forces that are, quote, not there for them. So it has to be something that we admit could exist or does exist, and then we can train in it. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. How could we train in something that doesn't exist for us? The mysteriousness of these forces consists only in their unfamiliarity. They are nonetheless accessible to everyone. The only one who cannot control them is the one who is controlled by them. So here we're talking again about the Isrun, self-mastery, right? Self-control, willpower. Listen to what he says here. It's very, very profound. The only one who cannot control the mysterious forces, the higher forces, is the one who is controlled by them. Either you are controlled by them, or they control you. I'm sorry. Either you are controlled by them, or you control them. Either you are controlled by them, or it should be they control you. There's no intermediate state. There is no intermediate state, right? Either you are controlled by them, or they control you. There's no intermediate state. It is not the domination that is difficult, the domination of the forces, but the liberation from controlled existence, that is, liberation from being ruled. Whosoever has made themselves free is already a monarch, a lord. The work must begin with the demons, of which I name the most powerful: lust, hatred, revenge, and all passions. It is not about abstaining, but establishing one's own governance instead of being ruled. This whole section, and I'll fix this typo in here, but this whole section is very important if we want to understand willpower, that we need to control ourselves. And it's not about just abstaining from something. That doesn't mean we control ourselves. Maybe in that moment we didn't do the thing, we abstained. But it's one thing to abstain, it's another thing to control ourselves, to completely be ruling over ourselves and over our decisions. A sudden, powerful event can lift the heaviest intoxication, can turn black hair gray, can unleash supernatural forces. The Lord of Forces can bring this about consciously at any time. And isn't it true that what can control you must be intrinsic and possess force? The purpose of magic is to transform the imperfect into perfection. And then he quotes New Testament, Matthew chapter 5, verse 48. You shall be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. It's interesting he's quoting the Bible because, remember, in these times, the early 1900s in Germany, the Völkisch movement was extremely popular. And so if you wanted to be edgy or even just with the flow, you weren't quoting the Bible, you were quoting some of the German texts and Nordic sagas and all that. But he's bringing it back to the Bible, just like that other guy in 1924, Ernst Tristan Kurzon. Continuing to quote here. In the qualities of a thing, one is able to see the characteristics of its present being or existence. A body or a force without qualities is unthinkable. So any thing, right, which has a body, it needs to have certain qualities. A body or a force. It has to have qualities associated with it, or else it doesn't exist. The same applies to consciousness. Movement without a moving thing is also impossible. For this, a drive or activation must inevitably take place out of an impulse. This is determined in the ancient Trinity: substance, force, and impulse. So he's saying three things. We need a substance, a thing, a body. We need a force, and then an impulse that begins the force or aims the force, directs it. The foundation of everything is another trinity: body, soul, and spirit. With the term body is to be understood form. With the term soul, one should understand the contents, that is to say, the conscious and unconscious instinctive life, the world of feelings, desires, and passions, the perceiving, building up and breaking down of the form, the imagining, animating, etc. And with the term spirit is to be understood the realization, the the ability to see things abstractly, to judge, and the consistency as both ability and as the real self. Therefore, wherever we find this Trinity, it is already acting. In which things is the Trinity to be recognized? We must concede that it is in being, existence, and magical force in its effect. From this, the conclusion is to be drawn, furthermore, that God as creator would not be provable, not recognizable, in short, would be missing for us humans, who do not act and move. The omnipotence of God, at least as we understand it, manifests itself in being and in existence, but not in non-existence. That is, we don't understand the omnipotence of God in non-existence, but only in existence. These realizations are absolutely necessary because they enable us to see the qualities of God as effective, magical, and creative entities. The qualities of God as effective, magical, and creative entities. By way of comparison, we could say that there are entities that have been sliced or split off from God. As such, these slices or spin-offs can also affect humans, but with the qualitative difference that exists between God as creator and human creature. Such divine entities are seen in a Sephiroth of the Kabbalah, the names of God, and in numbers. Keeping in mind that his book is about tarot, which it necessarily implies numbers, names of God, and Kabbalah. If I call upon the grace of God, I am addressing an intrinsic divine quality, and this aspect exists in the same way that no one will doubt the essential existence of motherly love. So we can call upon the grace of God, we can call upon motherly love. Those qualities are like forces of God that we can call upon, that even he's implying we can have inside of us. The opposite of nothing is something, and something can exist and act only in space and time. As above, so below. Whether there is a world besides ours which allows another being in acting, even a being without acting, we don't know. So we are convinced that force, soul, and spirit are not insubstantial, but intrinsic and inherent. It is unimportant whether we say that force, soul, and spirit are substances or that they are qualities bound to substances, because in the end, it's the same as saying ONE equals 1. 1 equals 1. And since every quality of ours can be traced back to 1, then 1 is qualitatively the sum of everything that exists, right? The unity. He's starting to develop a Kabbalistic theme here. From 1 equals ONE, everything arises. God is, as creator, is the number 1. The soul is the number 2, which can be good or bad, like the spirit, number 3. Thus, both have qualitatively 2 poles. The good pole is called theology, which is directed towards God, whereas the bad, quote-unquote, bad pole is called demonology and is directed towards the perverted shadows. The teaching of the church calls the entities of the good pole angel, archangel, etc., and those of the bad pole Satan, the devil, etc. Continuing to quote him here, continuous exercise with available forces leads to mastery, leading us from our own experiences to experiential knowledge. The training of one's own soul and spiritual forces leads to magic. Conscious practice requires comprehensive knowledge. Influence, sex appeal, prophecy, psychometry, everything is magic. The conscious magician is a knower, an artist, a master of their forces. They are not a medium. In the beginning was the Word, i.e., the consciously emitted will. This is also the beginning of our training. Strict thinking and development, as well as emitting sharply grasped concepts. This activity leads to the development of rays of force or force radiation. And these can be directed to a certain aim or held in forms. These processes are demonstratable. The simplest apparatus for this purpose is the sidereal pendulum, and every student should include in their exercises and research. Should include the pendulum in their exercises and research. The importance of its use arises from the possibility of objectively examining one's own performance as accurately as that of others. Pendulum is certainly popular, especially in the early and mid-1900s in German esoteric and occult circles because of, like he's saying, it's sort of objective. You can just hold it there and make sure that it reacts the same way or similar way and kind of learn from that. No one reaches the desired aim who does not set themselves up properly for it. Right? We don't achieve our goals unless we properly prepare ourselves to reach those goals. Before starting, the slate must be wiped clean. There is a determined rejection of everything that has been accepted, learned, and believed so far. So he's starting to give his magical training. And note the similarity between this and what we learned in Gnostic psychology, that we need to start from radical zero. We need to wipe away everything that has been accepted, learned, and believed so far. We need to put it on pause. If we're not touched by the confession of faith of foreign churches, which obliges us to do nothing, then we position ourselves in the same way against our own church, to which we have been unwillingly delivered. Every scholasticism is renounced, no matter from which side it approaches, whether church, science, or political party. This is because it is almost always in a struggle against higher spiritual realization. Always fighting the battle with material means of power and coercion instead of with spiritual weapons. Moreover, the thought processes of material science are applicable only to their subject areas, that is, to materialism, whereas our training begins in the border areas of so-called parapsychology. Instead of the churches and their colorful multiplicity, we place the only religion, and we begin with the superstructure of all churches, God as Ur-force, God as creator. Therefore, we are interested in service of God instead of service of the church. Now, he's talking about how to be a magician. God's temple is in us. The kingdom of God is in our bosom. In the beginning was action. This wiping out, putting away, this oath to God is the first action. Attainment of spiritual liberation in God consciousness. This is 1920s in German. Independence in thinking based on the causal law. No effect without cause, no cause without effect. Cold and sharp is the eastern wind of dawn. It clears the air, it dispels the clouds and turns the transparent heavens blue. Change or walk with this wind, not against it. Next, he gives, let's just see if you guys have any comments here. Experiential knowledge comes from experience, right? Meaning we have to do things. Can't just be reading books. Every word is formed experiential knowledge and has meaning. Every meaningful thing, the word is also a thing, has body, soul, and spirit, exactly like the human being, its originator. Consequently, it has past, present, and a future, and is spatially and temporally conditioned. It lives in the moment of its spoken development and then passes away. Passing away and dying is not cessation. Nothing stops. Everything is subject to dying and becoming, to the trinity of becoming, ruling, and then changing or transforming. Going up, working, going down. A constant working, like the sun, which also does not stop when it sets or goes down. This day and night existence is valid for everything existing. Unchangeably, everything disappears in the nights in order to rise out of the darkness, becoming radiant again to rule anew in the days. No word exists without vowels. They need the vowel sounds. However, word stems or trunks are formed from the consonants. Each culture fills these with vowels. Each vowel has a certain pitch. It vibrates and affects the area of the body it controls when it is pronounced. Therefore, vowel exercises can be used for healing purposes. Each vowel is connected with the body in the following way. I or E with the brain, the brow. E with the throat and the larynx. A with the apex of the lungs. Ao with the bosom or the chest. O with the heart. I don't know how to pronounce this. O with the umlaut on top, with the diaphragm, liver, stomach, solar plexus. Then the U with the umlaut. U with the kidneys. U without the umlaut with the intestines. And then Ui with the sexual organs. Vocalize the vowels and observe the excitation of the indicated bodily organs. It is interesting to see when we vocalize how certain parts of the body are stimulated. And then here, he's got it with the hand. These are graphics from another book to highlight what he's talking about. Raise the index finger while standing and let the vowel I sound. E. At the same time, direct the eyes to the index finger so that it will catch cosmic radiations like an antenna. This is 10 years before these other guys are writing, and he's talking about the same or similar things. The finger becomes hot, and clearly noticeable are the currents of cosmic radiations that trickle through the body to the feet, and beneath the soles of the feet begins to tingle. Now form an A, an upside down V, with the thumb and index finger, so that the current is conducted to the lungs. Next, with both fingers closed, form the O. So you do the A sound with the upside down V with the hand there, and make the O sound with the thumb touching the pointer finger or index finger. Consider the following correspondences. E to the index finger. E to the little finger. A to the middle finger. O to the ring finger. And U to the thumb, as well as these other areas of the body. The pitch of the individual vowel sounds according to notes. Pronounced at the right length, each note sounds almost like it is sung, like chanting or psalmoding. Everyone has their own natural pitch, which is correct, independent of the key. So he's got more, but we'll let you read this if you want to on your own. We'll just pull out some quotes here. Words are formed by vowels, and consonants reach the astral or intermediate realm, but not God per se. But do not forget, God as creator works by pronouncing the word. This word penetrates as a life current into the creature. The letters, therefore, are not forms to be animated, but are life itself working in us. With certain words, there is the possibility of falling victim to astral beings or demons, and ancient magical incantations provide examples and evidence for this. Therefore, the vowel exercises are recommended because they prevent this possibility and because of their ease. The following practices are to be taken with the idea that the currents of life enter through the corresponding outstretched fingers according to their respective vowels. They are led to the feet and then rise over the toes, ankles, knee, then abdomen, viscera, then heart, lungs, larynx, and finally to the brain. So you bring them down to the feet and then back up to the corresponding place. And then he's got certain mantras here. In any case, he gives planetary correspondences. It's very interesting, and of course, it's all available also for download in the PDF at the end of the class. But we're going to stop there and open it up for questions and comments if you have any. Hope this has been useful for you. I don't think we're going to be able to do a class next week, so it might be 2 weeks from now before we can do another one, which then we're going to go into our rune, our next rune. All right, well, it doesn't look like there's any questions or comments, but we want to thank you for your attention, for your time being here with us, and we want to wish you the best in your esoteric work. Until next time.